My name is Tshaka Campbell. I'm a father, a husband, and I would say a marketing professional. I have some of my what I call weekend Tshaka things that I do that's around poetry and spoken word performance. But you know, um, I would say again, marketing professional. Been doing it for probably over 20 years now in a number of different capacities over a number of different industries, from financial services to retail to AI, finance, but really just sort of kept with the marketing thread throughout all of those industries. A little bit of a mixed bag. My parents were originally from the West Indies and moved to London, England when they were at an early age. So I grew up in London. I grew up with a dad that had a very keen sense of education. Sort of everything for him was about education and making sure that we could provide for yourself, but then also understanding, just where he came from. My dad didn't come from lavish means and such, and it was always the understanding that the one thing that someone can't take away from you is your education and your drive. So he pushed that. My mom's it was a different kind of thing. I think you'll find this in a lot of Caribbean, West Indian families. Sort of, dad's education, mom is sort of structure. You know what I mean? And sort of, it was in tandem, right? So it's sort of like my dad was make sure you get educated. My mom was, well, I'm gonna make sure you don't have to worry about, food to eat and blah, 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 and blah, 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 so that they all join together such that there's nothing you really have to worry about except, trying to get an education, move forward. And then I moved to the United States, probably right around third or fourth grade. It's an interesting story, and I think it goes back to the idea of flexibility. I think again, and part of this is culturally, and part of this is sort of where folks grow up, is that you live a life of flexibility in the sense that you have to figure out how to maneuver things to make things work, because they're not always sort of handed to you on a silver platter, so to speak. So I had studied architecture. Again, I was, like I said, I love creativity, right? And building and things of that sort. So studied architecture, went to school for architecture, City College in New York, went to Virginia for a little bit for it. But then when I got back to New York and was studying, I was paying for myself going through school. So I was working, I had 2 or 3 jobs working and then going to school at the same time. But as I was getting right to the end of my architecture degree, I realized, and I was in New York City, right? So there's nothing, you can't really build anything in New York, right? And so outside of maybe interior design, there's no place to build unless you at the time moved out to the Midwest, for instance, where there's open field. The other thing with architecture is that depending on where you move to, you have to get retested, because of course, building buildings in New York do not have, certain earthquake codes that you would have when you build in California. So it's always a constant moving thing. But needless to say, I wasn't ready to leave New York City. It was during the time when I was enjoying myself. There was a lot more networking, from the sort of, again, the weekend Tshaka that I mentioned before. A lot of connections with that going on as well. And so I wasn't ready to leave to go someplace for that. So I had to figure out what was my next step. And so the way I looked at it was left brain, right brain, right? So creative and analytical. And so if you look at architecture, it has to look good. It has to be aesthetically pleasing, but it also has to have structure. It has to stand up. It has to, has code and all these things. And so the next thought was, if you think about marketing in that same frame, right? Aesthetically, you have to create campaigns and do things that are going to stop people, break through the clutter, be pleasing, but you have to have ROI, right? It has to deliver on what you're trying to do. And so, my step into marketing, which thought was like, this is very left brain, right brain as well, creativity and the analytic part, added to it. So I started taking some classes in school, and then got my associate's degree with it, and then moved on and got a bachelor's degree in marketing. And first it was a degree in advertising and communications, then a bachelor's degree in architecture, in integrated marketing. So that kind of boosted me into the marketing world. And at the time, I'd started working for a company called it was Saks Fifth Avenue, and I started doing some marketing in Saks Fifth Avenue. And originally, it was back then they called it Gal Guy Friday, which is it's so problematic at this point, but it was just sort of like an all-around sort of helper, administrative work, and then moved from there onto another position, and then into customer success and customer service, and sort of worked my way up. But that's when I really sort of understood this marketing thing was something that I really liked, and it really it played to both of those pieces for me, the creative side of things, but also the analytical side. If I wasn't a marketer, I'd be a psychologist, right? Because it is really about, at the core, it's about figuring out what makes people tick. From a business perspective, you're trying to do whatever to understand what influences human behavior, whether it's a B2B or a B2C. So B2C meaning I'm selling, cornflakes to a mom, or B2B, I'm selling this software program, I'm selling Zoom to this organization. At the end of the day, you're selling to individuals, right? And so you have to understand what's driving those individuals. But the kind of the step back moment, I would say, and if I was sort of talking to students, is in terms of understanding the marketing landscape, right? You've got to open up your brain. And this is an example that I'll give. I studied architecture and wanted to go to school for architecture. Like I said, I left New York, and I didn't, as I said in the beginning, didn't leave New York because I was like, hey, I can't build anything, right? About after I left and maybe 6-7 years after I left, bumped into a friend that I was in architecture school with, right? And he goes, I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I work in theater. And I'm like, you are a thespian? I didn't know you like plays and stuff. He's like, no, I do the sets. How do you think when they do a play that's a Western play or a play that's set in Victoria, like all of that has to be drawn out and built, right? And so it didn't even occur to me that you could sort of recharacterize the things that you've learned, right? Or or that skill set from an architecture perspective. And so it was an opening factor for me. So I would say when you think of marketing, think of it as it's everywhere, right? It's in everything we do. So don't think, folks are like, oh, I want to be a marketer. I want to be a sports marketer, right? You have time to figure it out. Use this opportunity to see what it is that you like, to not limit yourself into, I want to be a sports marketer, right? Because there's probably 13 other variations of that you can even be more happy with, right? So open up the scope and understand not the business, but it's understand. Folks say I want to do database marketing, but don't understand what really database marketing is. And there's enough information out there to get an idea. So I feel like don't just grab onto the terminology that you hear out there. Just do a little bit of research to understand what it is, because there's enough out there to give you that information before you start saying, this is what I want to do as my sort of end up career. Going back to your point about sort of the realm of it, right? I wouldn't even go into the online marketing versus the offline marketing, because that's more tactics that you use, right? So, if you're talking about marketing from a business perspective, I would take it up to first B2C, selling a product to an end consumer, directly to someone in their home or to an individual. And then there's a B2B market, which is you're selling to an organization. Now, the big difference between the two is that from a B2C perspective, it's a lot more, think of focus groups and research groups, right? You're talking to the individual and trying to get behind, what moms are thinking, what dads are thinking, what kids are thinking, why you put that toy commercial on the TV at Saturday at 9 o'clock, because that's when kids are, eating breakfast and watching TV, right? From the B2B perspective now, you're trying to get someone in an organization to buy a product from you. So it's almost like you have to talk to the CFO and the people in the C-suite to let them understand why this is economically going to benefit the entire organization. But you also have to talk to the practitioner, the one that's day to day, that's going to be using that software to say, hey, look how more efficient this is. Look how you can look better to your bosses. And, you know, and there's a lot more technical tools on the B2B side, because you have to find your way to the right person. And it's a lot harder to do than it is on a B2C perspective. So I would sort of put it up there. And then within those realms, you've got online, you've got direct TV, you know, direct mail, you've got commercials, and you've got billboards. And so all of those are mainly tactics to help deliver toward an objective coming from, you know, either one of those groups. So that's sort of how I would sort of, you know, build it up to its 50,000 feet or above, and then you build down to sort of the tools that you use. I love the agency side, right, from a working perspective, because as an employee, as a student, one of the things that you're going to gain with going into an agency is you're across multiple different brands and multiple different areas, right? When I was working on the agency side, I was doing something with Coca-Cola in Tokyo, and also doing something with ethanol, you know, ethanol gas in Houston, you know, and so it just ran the gamut. And so you really get a chance to see a wealth of different products and a wealth of different ways to market it. The challenge there is that it's a lot of work, because you're at the client's sort of beck and call. The advantage to going on the internal marketing is that you're not going as wide, but you're going deeper. So now you're not only learning how to market that product, but you're understanding the financials to that product, how that product is now built from a product development standpoint, how you've gone out to people and people say, here's this problem. You go back into your team, you build the solution, then you go out and you market it, and your salespeople sell it, right? So it's just on the in-house, you're going much deeper. On the agency, you're going wider. So it's really determining which one you're interested in at first, but you can jump from one to the other, I think. Oh wow, it's really hard, because from a startup perspective, what you get the opportunity to do is to see how organizations and brands are built and how they grow, right? So all the way from here's an idea to creating a category for that idea, and then slowly learning how to market it and how to sell it. So the great thing about there is that you're on the ground, right? You're on the ground level, really understanding how to build up and introduce a brand and market, right? The other side of it is an established brand. You know, you can slot into these things that are already established. And it is great because you kind of get a breath. You go into an Apple or you go into a Google, there's so much there, right? Not just in your workload, but if you don't like your particular department, there's multiple other departments that you could potentially go into marketing into, you know, in Google, there's Google Cloud, there's Google Classrooms on education, there's Google, you know, there's all kinds of stuff. So if you're centered into marketing and you're not loving it there, or you want to change, you can then go over to Google Cloud and marketing in there. So there's a lot of movement that you can avail yourself to within the organization. The challenge there, I think, is that you don't get to see as much your impact, right? Because you in the bigger organizations, you're a cog in a system. Now, what you do is important because you keep the gears moving, but you're one gear in a series of gears, right? So you don't always see the complete impact of what you're doing, but you've got the opportunity to learn. So you know what I mean? It's really hard. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you want to be a true marketer, and it's about like learning and really harnessing marketing, I would kind of go to the startup realm, not as secure, but I would go to the startup realm. If it's about like, you know, I like marketing, but I like marketing. However, you know, I want to use it as a stepping stone for other things. Then I would say potentially go into a well-established brand. But it's really unique to what the person wants. that's the one thing I can say I've been blessed about is, and is having great people around me, and I think that's twofold. That part of that is luck, but also part of that is placing yourself in situations where you can find people that can help you out, that know more than you, right? So you can sort of learn from them. And this is going all the way back. I mean, I fell in love with, words and literature from my seventh grade language arts teacher, right? And he had me, we read Animal Farm and 1984 by George Orwell. And so then, and I also love science fiction. So that just fell right into that thing for me. So, understanding at an early age how teachers and how people in a certain industry can help sort of round your edges. I learned that at an early age. So any environment where, I could go in and find someone who either knew, about the thing that I was interested in, or even if they mentioned it, if they knew someone who knew someone, right? For the most part, folks are willing to share, their information and help you along. I think we just have to sort of realize that we're not in it ourselves. And everyone, if you read about anyone who's made it to whatever top that is, they've mentioned that they've had people, in their corner. When you talk about building relationships, you don't build relationships because, I don't have to build a relationship with someone that I've known for 35 years. It's already there. But the key to building relationships is finding that thread between you and that other person. And the way to find that common thread is based off of your experiences, right? So I guess there's two parts of that question is immerse yourself in whatever you can, because you're going to take that with you and it will be beneficial. But at the same time, don't be afraid to share that, even if it's different, right? Even if your view is different, because that's how we all learn that you can do life differently, which also means you can do marketing differently, which also means that you put out a campaign that may be effective one way, but you're not realizing that it may be detrimental in another way, right? But you've noticed that because of the shoes that you've walked in, and you can bring that aspect to the organization, to the company. There's a lot of things that are out of our control, right? And so we have to figure out how reassess what I've done. When you're in the day-to-day, in the belly of the beast, you're kind of just doing. Because I had to pull back now and take a look at this, I was like, okay, I've accomplished this, I've done this. This is an area that I didn't even know I had the skill set to do, that now I'm doing this. It was coming back and actually taking an assessment of who I was and what I did. And it actually then put me back into the power position, because then I can ask the question, actually, do I even want to be here anymore, right? Because, I've grown and I have these things under my belt. So, I think from a resilience perspective, you also, my view is always trying to find that silver lining and spin it so that you're then in the power seat, so to speak. I think there's something to be said about, being in that experience, right? To honor your upset, right? So I think that there's something to be said. You just don't take it too far. Now, I think the reality is that I look at it as a muscle, and I look at it this way with this situation you're talking about, and many situations. We are who we are. We're human, and we are going to react. I think what you do is you strengthen the muscle so that you realize you're being that way sooner. And this is where it becomes a little bit, I don't know, just different, right? Is depending on where you come from and what your situation is, you don't always have the privilege or the freedom to react. On the larger side, I have a family. If I'm the single earning person in the family, I can be as mad as I want to, but I need to step out of it really quickly, because I've got rent to pay and bills to pay and people to take care of. So, you have to sort of manage it within, to your best ability. But luckily, I have these, luckily or unluckily, I have these things that I have to pull myself out of it quicker, because there's other responsibilities. And this, this too shall pass. If you take a step back, you've probably, had worse experiences and you're still here, right? And so it's kind of going back to, that it will pass, and we will find, we will find a way. And again, in whatever situation that is, whether that be a work situation, or that be a home life situation, or a combination of the both, you will figure it out. The epiphany that I had was that, um, I'm my own success. I there's only one Tshaka, right? And all of the uniqueness that I bring to whatever situation it is, I can't be afraid to bring that. And I think that's, and so if I open that up a little bit, what that means is that in any environment, there's something I can add, right? And so, whether it be my experience, whether it be, talking to someone who seemingly knows everything about this particular case, and me now introducing another piece of it because they haven't walked in my shoes, or the shoes that people that I know have walked in. And initially I was very, depending on the environment, I was very reluctant to talk about that stuff because, it's almost two sides of the track, so to speak. But you realize that the more you talk to people, the more things you do, the more things you immerse yourself in, is the more wealth of information you have. But I think when I talk about that epiphany, the epiphany was like, hey, Tshaka, you've done some stuff and you can add value to this situation on whatever level. Try and have fun with what you, I know we all have responsibilities, and I know we all work because I don't know how many people, there's probably a few people, 1% of the people that work just because they don't have to work, right? So there's a bit of, we get it, that it's a part of the life cycle, but try and enjoy what you want to do, right? Especially if you're younger coming, and when I say younger, I mean relatively in the sense of starting your journey in the workforce. You have time, right? You have time to figure it out. Use this opportunity to see what it is that you like. It has to be collaborative, because I think, if again, and I believe in this wholeheartedly, there's a sort of, there's like a hip hop saying, right? It's like it goes, if I eat, you eat, right? And what that basically means is that if I make it, the people around me will make it too, because we're all moving along together. And so I believe that wholeheartedly.